So we're going to make sense of everything we've heard this today so far, and I think I have the best panel yet. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. They can take a few minutes. We only have an hour. I think we can go a little bit over because there's a break afterwards. And you're supposed to, at the very end, hang out, and we're going to chat some more. So that's the way the event is designed. So we'll have a 15, almost a 30-minute break afterwards. So we're not going to go away. We'll finish. We'll go a little over, have Q&A, and then keep talking, okay? So I'm gonna let's see. I'll start. We'll start from since Texas State is hosting us. We'll let Marcelo, my cousin Marcelo from Brazil, go first.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Marcelo Carvalho. I'm an assistant professor in the Ingram School of Engineering here at Texas State University in the electrical engineering program. And I work with wireless networks, Internet of Things, smart networks, all these things. So I'm happy to be here and joining this nice panel. Thank you.
Erik?
And my name's Erik Anderson. I'm with the Lower Colorado River Authority, just up the road in Austin. And I'm responsible for our telecommunications business. And that means my team serves LCRA's internal operations, but also provides community services related to telecom to utilities, cooperatives, to internet service providers, and many others.
And Victor?
I'm Victor Carr with Austin Energy. I'm in charge of innovation for utilities, so that's probably the worst job to have in any industry. I was actually with Andres when he was our CIO, and when he determined what smart grid was, I was the person who had to go do it. So that tells you that I know a lot about the industry, as well as how the utility works itself. So it's nice to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, we're delighted you're here. And Jonothan?
Hi, everyone. Jonathan Van, Executive Vice President at Element 8. We're a next-generation ISP that covers DFW, Oklahoma, and Missouri, and 7 other states. I got roped in by Andres a few years ago to help lead the transition for the smart knock and everything else that you see. So we're excited to connect the dots between the new utility use cases for enterprises, and we're working with Tarrant County and Fort Worth, the city of Fort Worth, to bring forward many of the things that we've talked about. So glad to see it. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Andrew?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I work with Tantalus. For the last 2 years, I've been in charge of distribution automation and grid optimization. I left a electric utility after 17 years of being the engineering supervisor and running a utility in Indiana. And we started with the smart grid back in 2005. And it seems like it's been a long journey in how things are repeating themselves as we continue to move forward. So happy to be here.
And Tim?
Yeah, thanks, Andres. Appreciate it. Pleasure being here. My name is Tim Kipley. I'm with Everynet. I'm based in Austin, Texas. However, we run national neutral host is what it's called. It's a type of network to where we essentially build it on carrier infrastructure, and then we sell it out to other people to use. So whether it be a utility, another carrier, the AT&Ts and such, we build the network first, and then we sell it to them, or let them use it, I suppose. But we've got networks in 11 countries, nationwide networks in 11 countries. The U.S., we started building about mid-2021. We've got it mostly built out now. About 400 cities in the U.S. currently. Yep, thanks, Andres.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here. And in order to get us going, we had, we rehearsed. We called each other. They still answer my phone calls. And I asked them, maybe we could go around, kind of round robin. You could answer the question, take a couple seconds, 30 seconds or so, no more than that. But, let's go deeper into the peeling of the onion so that everybody can understand what Pete was talking about and some of the other conversations. So I'll start with this, and again, we'll maybe do it from Tim backwards. Tim, start, you be honest. What is your preferred networking technology for utilities and why?
Well, it's very interesting, actually. We're a LoRaWAN network operator. However, a lot of the talk here is obviously electricity grid. And what we've found, and I'll just be completely honest, is that electrical grid has different metering requirements, and we're talking about just reading meters or understanding what's at the endpoint. Electrical grid has more metering requirements than, let's say, water or gas or something along those lines. Of course, you have power at the meter, which you don't have in some of these other technologies. And, I would say, for most metering, LoRaWAN is excellent. It's low cost, it's long range, it's low power, it's great. However, there are many spots that alternate technologies work better. And for example, grid-wise, in Brazil, we use a lot of LoRaWAN in the grid when it comes to reclosers and such for fusing on the grid. However, when it comes to metering, we are not involved in it. So there's different needs for different portions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Andrew?
So going back to 2005, I mean, every network and every utility is different. So based on whether you're in a dense city or you're out in the rural community, if I could choose and had unlimited pocket, of money, I'd go fiber. I'd go fiber everywhere for what it provides. That's just not an option at certain places. But as Pete put up there on the screen, the amount of money being spent on fiber deployments across the country is phenomenal. Different places are running fiber. If that's not an option, cellular. If cellular's not an option, point-to-point radio. At Tantalus, we have everything from the fiber all the way down to 220 and point-to-point, and we'll use whatever it takes to help the utility meet the need of its community.
Great. Jonathan?
So speaking to that, we do next generation fixed wireless. So there's some new technology from Toronto that does non-line of sight fixed wireless that does anywhere between 75 to a gig wirelessly. And so when we talk our book, we say, hey, let's do hybrid networks. There's obviously fiber for middle mile and even beyond where it makes sense, but how do you cover that access layer? And so I can't speak from a utility perspective per se, but in the conversations we have with our partners, who are utilities, and they think about re-architecting their network, we think about if they can invest heavily in re-architecting their network using new things like Cisco routed optical networking. For full transparency, we've raised like $200 million from Digital Alpha and Cisco, so I might talk their book a little bit. But they have good technology, and it's just completely, it allows for any access. So when we think about, hey, should we use fiber, fixed wireless, anything like that, how do we think about interoperability from the core to the edge all the way to the access layer? Those are the kinds of things that allow both ourselves and the utility partners to think more dynamically about the way we roll our operations, the way they get the right amount of connectivity for both their core systems, but also how do they use their infrastructure for new things. Utilities now roll out connectivity as well. So in the places that make sense, where do we partner so that they can both take care of their core needs, but also potentially generate new revenue?
Okay, great. Victor, your favorite question?
I can't even really answer that. I mean, anything that works. Because there's so many different technologies for so many different, devices that, fiber would be the best, of course. Broadband over power line looks great at certain places, but certain places it doesn't work. So, if you don't have that umbrella network, you have to have fiber. So I would have to say fiber.
That's a good answer. Erik?
So I think about this in terms of reliability and resilience, and fiber. I mean, we have to think about it. You have to have at least two paths. You have to have a primary and a failover and maybe a third. So fiber, we use a lot of microwave, and private LTE is another emerging area for us.
Marcelo?
I would like to bring to the table this new technology this standard that's out there already from the IEEE to 2011 that they brought Wi-Fi, that they call now Wi-Fi Hello, to 900 megahertz, and it has this rich set of functionalities that you can actually deal with different characteristics according to what you can group things, you can group devices, you can actually deal with different aspects of the different needs. Of course, doesn't have the range that LoRa gets or similar technologies, but since it's like it works in 900 megahertz, it also reaches up to 1 kilometer. So I think there is a niche there for nice things to be done depending on what you want to accomplish. And I think it's time now to start playing with different things, especially also because of the security aspects of, and Wi-Fi has its legacy already. So I think it's another interesting technology that's coming now. Other, we have chips now being developed and hopefully within scale.
Yeah. So let me ask you a follow-up on that as it relates to your chosen technology and perhaps the ownership of that technology by the utility. So does it matter who owns the technology? Meaning, can I partner with Everynet for LoRaWAN and they own it, they manage it, and I use it as a service, or do I need to own it? Or what is that? What about fiber and everything else? What are your thoughts? Let's just go around the table again. So, Tim, what do you think? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm the utility, vertically integrated, little, big, whatever. Do I need to own it? Should I own it? Cybersecurity. What are the pros and cons?
Yeah, great question, actually, because LoRa is very easy to build your own. I mean, you can go buy a router for $100. You can buy a device for very inexpensive, and you've got one device talking to a gateway, and that's great. Making that work at scale is different. We have, issues when it comes to spectrum availability. We have, just all the, as the gentleman from LCRA brought up, I apologize, Erik. We have to be the ones that have two routes out of there. So we have to have multiple, LTE paths or LTE and fiber, whichever, or make our own technology to bounce the messages off other nearby online gateways. I mean, you can do it both, but what we do is, for a city like Austin, for someone like Austin Energy to go deploy and manage a LoRaWAN network around Austin would require quite a bit of manpower and quite a bit of past experience in doing it, and all the other things with deploying a network. So we try to take that off people's hands, and the fact that we're neutral hosts that allow us to sell, not just to Austin Energy to use it for their metering, but we can use it with Amazon where they can use it for package tracking, or we can use it at Dell for whatever, whatever they want to use inside there. So that same network gets used by multiple people and therefore lowering the cost of it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Andrew?
So we have utilities that range from 500 customers to, million plus customers. Of that 300 utilities that we serve. So that answer, we work with the utility to make, what makes sense to the utility. Some like to own their own. It could be microwave, it could be private cellular, it could be working with a Verizon cellular, it could be running their own fiber. Many of them that are large enough now are doing multiple paths, like you just mentioned, where they own one themselves for an emergency failover, and they use private LTE or even a Verizon AT&T FirstNet type solution, or even, as you mentioned, the non-point-to-point, high-speed wireless. But again, at Tantalus, what we're trying to do is we partner with our utilities. So what makes sense is we're very flexible, and we can help guide them and help them install from the smallest to the largest, and help them make the appropriate decision based on their size. And as Dr. Butler put it earlier, how many people are working there and the entrepreneurs they have in the community and the staff that's available is what we help them choose.
Jonathan?
I think that's the right nuance, which is what's the size of the utility and what are their capabilities. So when we talk to most of them, if they're comfortable laying fiber where it makes sense, they have the crews, they have the trucks, they have the expertise, and they can hire for that. But when it comes to wireless, sometimes, whether it's like private LTE or some of the work that we do, it's more operationally intense, and it's not something that they have on hand. It's not like laying fiber. It's a little bit more black box in that way, and I think that's what opens up the potential for partnerships on our end, which is we are working with a new technology. It's disruptive, it's new, but we're also taking the learnings that we have and then being able to implement that on their behalf. However, they do like to own stuff, so they like to own the infrastructure, and we're happy to have them own stuff. But if we can do an operating and management agreement, that's kind of where we see, at least on the large side, where things play out, which is who's got the best cost of capital, who's got what skills, and then that's kind of how we break down the partnership. Then it's just kind of working through which one makes economic sense. As you get into smaller, we just say, hey, we're going to put up the infrastructure, and if we can help you, we're happy to do so.
Great, great. Victor?
Well, we're Austin Energy, so we're the little utility that could. So we built as much fiber as we could. I remember there was a there was a memo that I had to type up to say that we're going to buy a certain amount of fiber for every time we put out in the air, and Andres had to sign it. So it looked like it came from him. So every time they asked him, he had to come to me. So we actually did that, and so we went from just running 2 pair of fiber everywhere to actually running at least 24. You couldn't do less than 24 anywhere we did. So no one thought that we would use all of that fiber, and of course we did. So when you do that and when you have that type of growth, you automatically start building toward that growth. But at some point, you can't build for that growth that fast. I mean, there's only so much static line that you can put out there. So we had to start kind of teaming up with some other vendors of the Verizons, of AT&T types, as well as, our crew became more mobile and mobile connected. So we had to start kind of figure out how we're going to get them back into the fray as well. So when we say, can you make those partnerships work? You can. Some of them you have to. But most of the times we try to control everything that we can, and we've done a pretty good job.
Okay. Erik?
I'd say for my organization, definitely owning and controlling the network is really, really important for security reasons and a lot of other reasons. But we've turned that a little bit in that we share our network as well with others. So I can give you 3 examples. We have a land mobile radio network that we operate for our own crews, but we share the capacity on that network with others. Our fiber network we share with internet service providers. And we also work in collaboration with a lot of the rural co-ops and municipal utilities on communication. So we own it, but yet we share it with those trusted partners.
And we fiber swap sometime as well. So
That's right.
if we have fiber in the area, they don't, and vice versa.
Yeah, it works well.
All right. Marcelo?
So I don't own a company, so my point of view would be from the
Yes.
consumer side, or also think in terms of technology. I think we have to think in terms of scalability. So these things are growing more meters. So we just heard about the amount of unconnected device we have, and we need to think about that. And so potentially all those technologies that I know we medium in physical layer and access control, they don't think about it's specifically for smart grid, it's specifically for robotics, so it's specific, so we're not thinking about that. And I believe we need to focus on technologies that can give that space for scalable growth so that you guys can take advantage of that and can be more, easy to work with, I guess.
Yeah. So let's switch to another question, and we'll switch the order. We'll start with Marcelo. So what strategies or how are you protecting your ecosystem? You own some, you partner some. So when it comes to cybersecurity, the data, what are your strategies? What are your best practices? Share some nuggets. What R&D is happening on cybersecurity? What do we need to know? Marcelo, start you, and then they're thinking about their answer.
That's a very hard question because when you think about Internet of Things, a lot of the development, we're talking about devices that are very resource constrained. I mean, they not allow you to do a lot of operations. There are many fancy, very sophisticated technologies to give you very nice protection, but you cannot embed that in many of those devices. So that's a very important question because if you're getting data or if you want to protect consumers, for instance, can I attack your house? Can I just, if you rely on energy for your medical support at home, and I'm somehow your important person, can I just attack those little devices that are so easy to attack? That's for sure today is very easy. I mean, it's very, the other day we were talking about water supply, right? So who's taking care of water systems? Are they really protected? Someone can just come and do something harmful. It's very easy. And so there are developments in this area. but I think we need to create layers of different, because the very simple device that connect you to this, do this smart metering things, they cannot handle much. So, and one way of, the research people we're dealing with this is creating these layers and creating the federations so we can learn from different devices as they collect things together, we can understand better, and then AI can come to play so that we enforce better strategies to authenticate, understand, and promote security.
Okay. Erik, what about you guys? How are you protecting all this for cybersecurity?
So I can't talk too much about it, but
It's top secret, but give us a sense. Give us a sense.
So one is that it's something that happens every day. We are attacked every day. So it is not a theoretical problem. It's a data problem.
Quick anecdote. No, sorry to interrupt you. When I joined Austin Energy in 2003, we were being attacked 50,000 times a day. And when I left, it was 10 million. I don't know what's today, but I imagine it's north of that.
Yeah.
It was his fault. No, the story is he went in front of the whole world and said we had the most secure environment in the world. So you can imagine what that just laid the gauntlet out, and so that's what happened.
The challenge.
So go ahead, Erik.
So when you think about planning and designing all these things, getting lots of eyes on it, from your cybersecurity team, from your physical security team, from your colleagues in industry, suppliers, and fellow utilities and neighbors, it's really, really important for us to do that. So I think that kind of collaboration is important.
Absolutely. Victor?
I definitely agree with that. Putting more effort into detection and more how people are working with these devices. So when you start thinking of security, you start trying to secure the appliances instead of securing behaviors. And once you do that, you can it's easier to kind of see what's going on in the network. One other thing that we're starting to do and we're starting to kind of pay attention to is how the devices actually work. So if you have an RTU that's, at 10% utilization most of the time and it spikes up to 50, something's wrong. So when you start kind of concatenating a lot of these information spaces, it kind of helps. And I hope I did that without giving away any information.
Tracking data, that's good. Go ahead, Jonathan. Give us nuggets.
Yeah, no, a little bit of it goes back to like doing your everyday hygiene, right? Like some of it's like, having your VPN actually activated to all the boring stuff. We think about it, we've seen a lot of phishing attacks, so it's really just like a lot of it's teaching your people to think about it every day and then making sure they're communicating. On the more technology side, we are putting DDoS at the edge at like the tower level so that we can isolate some of the cybersecurity risks at that stage and then mitigate it there. That's like the more sexy answer, but from like an internal perspective, so much of our work is just like brushing your teeth. It's not sexy, but if everyone does it correctly every day, there's an easy day.
Go ahead,
I think
Andrew.
to elaborate on what everybody said so far, at Tantalus, what we've done, we have some of our own equipment. And as you may have heard Pete mention, we sprinkle the data around in our 902 to 928 through the 64,000 channels. So if there is an issue, they're grabbing a nugget of data using multi-factor authentication to try to put it back together. And at our factory, we're using secure Linux boot to go on the chips so that when things come out of the factory, they're as secure as they can be before it ever arrives. And then we use, different ways of marriage files and things of that to authenticate devices before allowing them even onto a utilities network. But everything that everybody said to this point, we also participate in.
Okay. Tim?
Yeah, this is a great point, and I think the answers show why it's a great point, is that there's so many different answers to how do I secure my network, or how do I secure my devices, or the operation of, what I want to do. And, from our side, I guess one of the things that we took on early on, LoRaWAN, again, being a fairly new technology, there were a lot of vendors who were new at developing this technology as well. So we put in essentially a device testing lab that verified the authenticity of the device, that verified they're using different keys, that they're not, essentially which we've seen before, people using the same security keys across. We verify their procedures to get those keys to the end user who's using it is safe and correct. So I agree with everyone here. It's a multifaceted approach. Each technology has its own sort of drawbacks and good points, but it is up to these companies that are up here to be sure that their portion of it is as secure as possible, and that's what we do.
Right. So, real quick question for the panel. I don't know if the panel is keeping track, but is everybody aware of the hacking on security that went down in Vegas? Does anybody want to share? Does anybody have a good? Anybody know what happened there? Anybody got any insights? So you all know that the casinos were shut down, and Caesars had to pay out somebody to. Anybody know a little bit of this story? 50 million MGM. Okay. So when you think about this, and I take you back to Pete's, keynote, is the hard part, because you guys are tasked with this digitalization journey that has started a long time ago, and I feel guilty at times about it, but it's not going to stop, right? It's going to be 10x, 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 eventually until everything has a sensor, everything is talking to the network, some network. So what if you think we have problems now, wait until 10 years from now. So the question is the challenge of managing these networks and all this really the network itself, or is it the data? And is there a simpler problem to trying to solve by trying to make the data interoperable versus worrying about the network and the types of networks? I mean, I think you're always going to have all kinds of different technologies for different kinds of use cases, but you need the data everywhere else or somewhere. Any thoughts on that? Anybody want to chime in on that about data and interoperability of data? And is that kind of the core thing that if we fix that, then everything else falls into place? Or any thoughts on that? Anybody to chime in?
Maybe. So I have a little different outlook on that, because it's data ownership.
Right.
It's kind of more of the issue, because it depends on who owns the data and who wants to share that data. You may not be able to do that. So I don't know how you could move forward without.
But if the data is coming to you and you're the steward of the data, is the important thing the interoperability of the data, regardless of the network issues, the edge device issues that can be hacked, or this or that? I mean, is managing the data and getting it to the right place the most important thing?
I would say so, yes, absolutely. I don't think the network is the issue at that point, because the networks are built resiliently to hold all different types of data. So I think one of the situations we had when we put in an IP phone system at Austin Energy, one of the first things was the phone system. We can't do that because it has to be connection oriented. It has to be a separate system. What happens if the network goes down? And my first answer is going to be, well, if the network goes down, I'm not worried about the phone system. So once you understand the
Priorities.
the importance and the priorities of what data you're putting across that network, I think that actually helps. So the interoperability at that point has to go to that. So how important is it?
Right. Anybody else wants to chime in on that?
I would agree with Victor on part of that, from the standpoint of, if we're talking smart cities and the data is owned by the municipality and the city, making that data available to all departments to be able to have different things done on that data in real time is paramount. If that data is lagging and trailing, it becomes invaluable data that's just sitting there, like the 80% that was mentioned earlier, that's not being utilized and maybe mined later. My former utility, my former job, we were buying power on the open market through Morgan Stanley in real time at a little small co-op. But we were able to do that using the network, the data that was coming in live in real time to be able to, spot market buy. Mm-hmm. So it's paramount that the data gets to the right place, the right time, for the right people, that interoperability.
Yeah.
I think that last part on interoperability and like getting it to the right people, like when we've explored data sharing, it's been like content providers and service providers. It's like a constant battle on how do we share data, the right data. And as long as we can make it visible and at the right time share, say the security side, whose side is it on and to the right person, we're not even there yet. So we're not even at a point where I would say the data's in one place. That's why we put the infrastructure out there. And that kind of leads me to a kind of a question, which is how do you find that if more compute and more storage is out at the edge, so at the device level, does that help or hinder you as a utility mitigate those kind of things? Because some of the devices I see are like, they're not very hot. I don't know. That's what I'm at. Does it help? Help or hinder?
I think it hinders. There's so much data that you don't know you need until it gets normalized at least one time.
Yeah.
It has to get normalized at least 3 other times after that, once you actually figure out that, hey, this is important. Now what do I do with it?
Yeah.
And there are people that are afraid of what that information is going to tell you. I mean, everyone knows that every utility has an aging network, aging devices in the field. Do you really want to know which ones they are?
And how many?
No, and you don't have the manpower to actually deal with that.
Right.
So once you do start getting that information, now what do you do?
Yeah. No, that's the
We like to,
misalignment.
we like to say the data distributed intelligence is where you need it. If it's needed at the edge at a substation, at an RTU in real time to control a substation, let's make sure it's there. If it's somewhere that's not needed in real time, we can do it in the cloud a little bit slower. We can do it here, there, where it's needed, based on the urgency.
Let's talk about something that is interesting. You all will chime in on this. So if I'm a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? When it comes to networking, you may have that attitude or not. What are your thoughts about? Let's talk about time. Right time, real time, close enough time, 2 seconds later time, microseconds time, milliseconds time. Can we talk about that for a second? The importance of, do I need to have a hammer and CNL on everything that I do in terms of networking, or is the time needed and when is needed, does that drive the network?
Right. Right. I mean, one thought on that is these meter reads, most, utilities maybe read them 4 times a day. Is that time critical? No, not at all. It can come in anytime during the day, and most times it's scattered throughout the day for different sorts of meters. But, if we're looking at the pressure at a fire hydrant that just got hit by a car, that is something that we want immediately to be, or we want the utility to be immediately notified of. In many cases, again, LoRa is a sort of unique technology, very low bandwidth, very low data rate, but very long range. So the trade-offs is you can't push much data through it, but it'll go for a long time, and low battery life. So in a lot of these cases, it's fine. LoRa is fine. I mean, does 1 or 2 seconds, is that okay? Yeah, that's generally okay. But if we're talking some of these, life emergency events, or flooding type of issues, or those sorts of issues, there could absolutely be a need for less latency on the connections.
Got it. Andrew?
Again, it's application dependent from your substation level. If you've got a line laying on a car and you have people trapped in the car, you have to have that open instantly. You want that to be whatever technology is available to meet that need on the network. At Tantalus, we believe in the push technology, and so we've taken a little different approach that data, if we can push it every 5 minutes or every minute or every 30 seconds from the side of a home, changes the dynamic of what's going on behind the meter when it comes to EVs and DERMs. If you think about an F-150 Lightning, and again, I used to run a utility, that's 6 air conditioners coming online. So when those 6 air conditioners, when Pete plugs his F-150 in and I got a 15 can hanging on the pole, if that 15 can happens to be connected to the neighbor's house and their air conditioner comes on, that's 7 AC units. If I can have that meter report to me in real time with load limiting capability in it, then I can protect the asset that's in the field, right? I no longer have to worry about his neighbor seeing the oil spill on the ground and the transformer pole catching on fire and the outage. I can now use that real-time data to protect the transformer, to protect the wire in the ground, to eliminate the truck roll, to eliminate the bucket truck roll, to eliminate the overtime pay. So speed is of the essence. Now, again, same principle. I had pumps way, 200 miles out in the middle of nowhere. That was a pump for irrigation. I didn't need that back for a few minutes. If the pump went on, great. If it didn't, so be it. So there's a need for each and every kind of application. But if you can make that application specific, Now you can start to do things that have been mentioned here earlier today for smart cities, smart lighting controls, smart water heater controls, peak pricing controls. It's all based on what your need is and what that data is available to be able to make those decisions within the community or the utility.
Awesome. Jonathan, chime in.
Kind of a question. How do you know where to invest like a certain amount for those kind of like whether it's real time, quarterly, et cetera? Because you're kind of flying blind typically.
Well, Victor can probably talk to this too, but we started
I'm
this.
not going to.
We started the substation. Before I started at the utility, I traveled the world doing substation and SCADA installs, and we always had the view that a utility was protecting its assets. We were protecting the infrastructure, and we didn't care about the customer. They were the cash register and cash register only, right? Now, we want that customer to have the experience when they turn the light on, it's always ready to go, right? So there's super expensive equipment in the substation where we've had that information that we can extrapolate to the side of the home that we couldn't verify. Now we have these smart meters out there that keep you going instantly around the clock 24/7. Every so many seconds can now tell you if your power blinks, if you've seen a transient spike. Then you can take that data all the way back to your substation. Well, that's where I know I want to install the high dollar equipment. I have to know based on a substation, a feeder, a neighborhood, a part of the city that needs that immediacy.
I asked that because I feel like the overlay of all these investments is how much do we have to pay to get these things involved and where, right?
Trillions.
Right? And we want to, like, we run fiber, we know that it's great, and you want to future-proof it because you don't think you're going to use it today, 3 years, but, at some point you will hit that threshold. And so how
24 strands.
So
We were running 144 around the substation,
So, like,
288. I mean,
it's kind of like building to peak, right? You were talking about building to peak. When you see like BEAD or some of the new energy funding coming out, is that a chance as a utility to say, hey, let's future-proof as much as we can, or how do utilities think about it?
I knew we were doing the right thing when I interviewed him and we talked for a little bit. And I had this thing about the any device, any what? You remember that? Huh? There you go. And this is another former colleague. And we basically, said, yeah, Victor said, so how many strands do you need? He just kind of 24. This is 2003.
Yes.
So anyway, you want to chime in on that?
I better not. Okay, I'll do it this way. Austin Energy abstains. Now, Victor Carr will say, where are you on the customer side of the meter or on the utility side of the meter? So that's going to matter, and it kind of gets blurred. The reason I say that, here's a safety situation. When I started, we didn't have to worry about backfeed onto the infrastructure. So right now, how much notice do you give that crew person who's out there touching the line that a inverter has popped on and someone's generator's popped on? So now if he doesn't have the information that fast, he's holding it because he's heard from the control room that there's no power coming from the substation. So he thinks he's safe. So at that point, boom, he's holding all the voltage. And if he's, depending on how he's grounded, he may become that. And we've seen that situation in multiple places, not in Austin Energy, but in multiple places we've seen that happen.
we encourage all of our customers to go bidirectional metering in real time. So there's 300 of our utilities. Anytime there's a storm, anytime there's anything, which happened in Uri, if that meter can tell exactly what Victor just said, we can be on the radio to tell the line crew, do not touch anything. Keep, I know you just want to wear your leathers, but keep your rubbers on, keep your sleeves on, keep the truck grounded. There's backfeed in the area, and that meter pops up on the screen in the utility dispatch room, and then we can tell them in real time to try to protect their life. So,
Good one. Erik?
I think that, I'll also abstain a little bit, but speaking personally, when I think about the water business, where I came from before LCRA, having millisecond or instant information wasn't that important. In the electricity business, it absolutely matters, right? For safety, for load, for generators, for transmission entities, for distribution companies, and for consumers. it matters. But for water, you might, because the meters, you may only need them to communicate 4 or 6 times a day back to the home office. And the main thing is for water efficiency and for capturing leaks on the customer side of the meter. And so, and for battery life reasons, you may not want to talk to that water meter every 5 minutes. That's going to kill the battery. So maybe 4 times a day is good enough. So it depends on the application.
Yeah, Marcelo?
I want just to make a link with your previous question about, I keep thinking about interoperability also, and this issue about, this, how much you sample data, because there is always a demand that's specific, right, for or different devices. And I keep thinking about how the internet was thought, the idea, we had this standardized 7 layers, we have to do things like that, and let's, right, and in the end, we learn from experience that, the simple solution was the one that actually worked. So keep things simple, let people do the nice things we have now. So keep the core very simple so that things can communicate with each other.
Right.
So I guess something.
Yeah, no, it's good. Do you guys have any questions of each other? No? Anybody want to ask anything? No. Okay, so
There's a question.
one moment before I go to you. So here's my use case. We'll use Pete because Pete got ahead of me. So he has the lighting one, F-150 lighting. So this is what Pete's going to do. He didn't tell us this, but this is what because he doesn't like the fact that he gets this big bill, maybe $500 a month from Eversource. So he's going to go to work. He's going to charge the F-150 at work for free. Okay, because he pays a rent at work that includes electricity, and electricity is unlimited at work for free. So he'll charge his truck for free, and then he'll come home and run the house from the truck and pay no electricity. So Victor, if the 1 million customers plus at Austin Energy decide to do that, what will happen to the grid? Just give us a sense for what will happen to the grid.
Well, first thing's going to happen is Austin Fire Department is going to get called from all these trucks blowing up. There's no way you're going to be able to do that. Okay, so Austin Energy abstains. So what Victor will say is that if that happens, you have a distributed, a volatile distributed system that can't be controlled. So other than things melting because of the heat generated from actually using all of these devices, I don't know how you sustain it, and I don't know how long it actually is even going to last. I'd say you get maybe 45 minutes out of the whole thing, and then you have a blackout.
There you go. That's what's going to happen.
Victor Carr said that.
So be careful of plugging that F-150. Anybody else wants to chime in on that hypothetical? I mean, what would the utility need to do? What needs to be done differently?
We have a product.
Clearly, we need Tantalus.
Yeah, we do. We have a product out there now that, it's called our CIQ family of product suites that we can monitor that. We can monitor when those devices start to connect. So let's say that hypothetical scenario starts to take place. One, it changes the business model for the utility, and it changes your pay structure, and it changes your rate structure, and it changes all those things from a financial impact. But from a technology perspective, we can now start to see those things already and then start to load limit. We can start to disconnect. So in that hypothetical, we start to see too many of those neighbors do that. We instantly start opening the meter and disconnecting and say, no, your truck can run your house, but I'm going to keep power to the transformer. And in that point, we can turn you into an island. We can take you into a microgrid and manage that and monitor that and run it from the utility perspective, grab that data from the F-150, grab that data that we see out there, and start to be able to manage and monitor that data to know, say, Austin Energy sees 700 EVs out there. We can now articulate and see that amount of energy and what it's doing on the DERM side, feed it to a DERM system, and then be able to say, okay, let's get ready to bring those transformers back online from a cold load pickup scenario, right? Because when all those trucks come offline or want to come back onto the power grid, there's going to be a surge on those different feeders where we have to bring them back on in a nice ramped manner, right? So we don't want to overload a circuit. So we have that technology already. It's just a matter of the distributed intelligence of putting it where it needs to go. And as you guys know, especially you guys, when I worked with the utility, when you get an electric car, you don't often call the utility. When you get add-on to the house, you don't call the utility. When you get a new water heater, you don't call the utility. When you get something new, you don't call the utility. And so the utility figures it out when your transformer's overloaded. So now through AMI, we have to be able to take that data, turn that into actionable intelligence, and do the right thing and protect those assets.
Got it. Question?
Let's talk about data transparency and the legal profession.
Okay, data transparency in the legal profession.
What we do is with the airline industry, the automobile industry, when there's an accident, we ask the manager, did you know?
Mhm.
And so your example of the guy with his hand gets electrocuted,
Uh-huh.
if you have the data that he should have known, then you get jumped up. So one of the things about the transparency and the not hiding of data is that in the future, given all the data that you have, if something happens to my house, if something blows up, if somebody gets killed, the lawyer's going to say, Victor, did you know? And you're going to say, well, I had the data, but.
But
Jonathan?
that's a great point, but hold on.
Wait, let me finish now. Jonathan?
No, but
Jonathan, you haven't, when did you finish with your team?
2014,
What were you in my class?
2012.
You haven't changed at all.
No.
So Jonathan, when we talk about business and transparency and legal, what do we say? If you knew about the possibility that something was going to happen, you are responsible. So what data in real time, and the financial industry does it all the time, right? I mean, if you invest in stuff, you get, I mean, it's just running like all the time. So why can't we go to the financial industry and create the analog of that with all of the data? Because I think in the future, somebody's going to say, well, there's a data to show that if I hadn't touched that thing, I would be alive.
Mm-hmm. But what about AI? What if the data is being managed by AI?
Well, we're
And not by
talking-
humans.
Somebody's got to be responsible for that robot slapping you. My question is, what's the relationship between what you know, what you could know through the data? It's like an airplane crash. Every time an airplane crashes, we want to know. An automobile, we want to know. Housing falling down, we want to know. What did the data say?
I can tell you that we pay heavily to federated insurance in the utility industry because we did know. We did know when a house was going to burn. We did know when a pole was going to fall. We did know when somebody was going to get hurt, and we did pay out a lot of money. I mean, it was the wonderful things we were able to accomplish having that data and to provide the service and customer service was phenomenal. In the same breath, when the accident occurred from, certain things and certain hours, we were liable.
Okay. So transparency for Austin is great. The city just paid for it. Anybody got any comments on that? I think that you go to the industry or the financial industry and look at their models, and data just flying everywhere. Look on everything is flying.
Yeah.
Everything is going.
Question?
But my question.
They're not going to answer. They're not lawyers, Johnny. They're not lawyers, Johnny.
And you brought mini grids, microgrids, there's personal grids.
Yep.
You now have the hybridized approach of energy generation within each of those, from trains with kinetic energy, with all these other different types. From a smart network with conflicting ownership of personal grids, mini grids, microgrids, how can you construct the smart network that can comprehend and have an impact across these future architecture and future energy sources?
Absolutely. Guys? Anybody?
So the network can already be built and is already being built at several of our customers. It comes down to a legislative issue and a utility legislative issue on what you're allowed to do and where you're allowed to participate and what utilities are willing to participate in. So for my 25 years in the industry, we stopped at the side of the home, right? You just didn't want to go any farther. Now, that is completely not the case. Now you're going as far as you can behind the meter to be able to utilize any asset at your disposal, right? The network's already built. We already have the capability to go behind the meter, to talk to the devices, to monitor those using IP information. We don't even need the protocol. We can just have our devices out on a table out here that can be, fiber, cellular, Ethernet to the side of a home, and then it extends the network for the utility into the home, so it's not on the, the consumer Wi-Fi. So now the utility again gains responsibility for those devices on when to curtail load, when to shift load, when to island, when to do things. But the utility and its members or the customer base have to be willing to participate, right? Right now, we cannot, the only way from a utility perspective is we do it from a safety perspective. So whether Victor will go on the record and say or not, we can mandate from a utility perspective that you will install XYZ if you're going to put a solar grid up on your house, or if you're going to put that F-150 Lightning, I can mandate you that you have to put a device on so that I can protect the utility's investment. Then I can see it all and do different things, but I have to have the owner's permission in almost every state at this point in time. But I can shut it off if it affects my grid, right? If it begins to affect that feeder, I can isolate it and I can throw it offline, or I can reduce its power or do different things to protect Austin Energy or to protect my 300 customers at Tantalus, to be able to protect the assets that we've invested in. Right?
So we kind of built something more towards, we have a program that started with controlling our thermostats. And that actually had some ancillary benefits for, and I don't want to say this word out loud, but load shed, so that we can actually control your thermostat for milliseconds to actually get that power back on the grid. So by being able to do that, that actually made us to where we can get on the other side of the meter and we can look at pool pumps, and there's certain signatures for everything inside of the house. So we can kind of see those things from the meter side, but we're actually reaching into the house. And he's correct. There was a time when we could not go past the meter and we couldn't even think about it. And it was legislative. We just couldn't do it.
Well, Victor, it took me months to figure out how to block that feed when you started.
If you'd reached out to me, I could have told you.
So we got 4 minutes left. One last question, perhaps? Yeah, Eddie, please. Yeah. Eddie is from Brownsville. He runs Brownsville.
Well, kind of going back to his point, though, because he's saying, from the legal perspective, you knew. But by the same token, the customer bears a responsibility. If I'm going to go buy a Lightning, if I'm going to go put all this in, kind of going back to your point, my thought is, well, the utility's going to have, period, end of story, the ability to island you.
Sure.
Otherwise, you're going to kill people.
Sure.
And in the end, the responsibility is shared.
It's both ways.
Yeah, because
I agree.
I'm going to have to, as a customer, I'm going to have to let you do that.
It does, but right now there's no way to recoup those costs, right? If you put that F-150 in and Pete goes and hires an electrician and they don't call Eversource and Pete burns the transformer down, right now there's a problem with Eversource recouping their fees. I know, but we had the same issue at my former utility, was that if we couldn't get the member to participate and call at a co-op, we subsidized those costs and we spread those rates out, and so we were able to go in front of the OUCC and unbundle all the costs as true cost of service for people that have EVs, people that have solar, and across the state line in Ohio, Buckeye Power was the opposite. They're like, no, sorry, we're going to pay back at retail, and so it's all legislative right now. And every state is just a little bit different as we travel around the country. Everyone is in their different facets of where they are. California, Texas, New York, Massachusetts, they're a little bit ahead of the Midwest and the South when it comes to some of this stuff that we're talking about, just based on legislative actions.
Yeah, since we're muting, that's one of the things that I've mentioned to our people that we need to be looking at, because if you're solar or EV, you're putting a way bigger strain on the system, and is that fair to everybody else?
Right.
Because typically, when you make these kinds of announcements, everybody gets all shook up, and that's terrible, that's terrible. Then, for years, I did customer service, and one of the things I would do with customers is explain to them, well, wait a minute. Do you understand that this guy over here is causing all this? This is the problem that's being caused, and you and I are paying for it. Right. And immediately the perspective would change, and it's, what? Well, that's not right. You know, well, yeah. You know.
I think it was mentioned, Dr. Butler, education earlier. We have, as from a utility perspective, to educate the public is a Herculean effort.
Do you have a follow-up, Pete?
I was going to say, since I'm the subject of a lot of debate here, I'm glad to see that that's the case. I've added value today. At least in my own mind. Right? The answer, in my opinion, ties back to ensuring the utility, my personal utility, Eversource, eventually has visibility to what I'm doing as a consumer.
Sure.
And then from that visibility, the command and control, it's not only the device, but then the communications network.
Right.
And as it relates to Mr. Butler's question, from one attorney to another, what's the liability of not knowing? Because if you ask Hawaii Electric, I think they prefer to know. From what they didn't know, or what they're claiming they didn't know.
Yeah.
Gary?
Yeah, which is this is fascinating watching this. I want to congratulate this discussion, but also say that one of the things we are noticing now in California is you can do all you want at home in order to charge, Peter, but this whole vehicle to grid pipe dream, utilities are beginning to now talk about a connect rate.
Sure.
You have to interconnect and do 42222. There is a connect rate which fundamentally brings in the disadvantaged folks who can't afford to be Peter and buy the 450 and then go off grid, right? So what is the value of that connect rate is the subject of a lot of discussion. But
Yeah, the business model behind it. Yeah. Hey, let me ask these guys a question that I think is interesting for you all to hear their answers, and perhaps we'll wrap it up there. So if I told you, and you guys will hear, this is one of the reasons I was always well paid in all these companies that I worked for, because my salary was directly proportionally attached to the number of acronyms that I created when I was working. So you have this, the challenge with the industrial world is you have these networks, you know. You can start in the home with things like BACnet or KNX or things like that, and then you go into, that's for home automation stuff, and then you can get into the electric world and SCADA world with, Modbus and the MP3 and multi-speak, and the Europeans and the Americans can't agree on anything 50 hertz, 60 hertz, and networking the same thing. And then eventually you get to other things, and then ultimately we get to IP, and there's now all these other different standards, IC 68150, blah, 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 blah. There's a million acronyms, and then you got things like, MQTT and co-op and DDS, and how the networking happens and the data gets moved around. What if I told you all that there was a way to synthesize all this data, to homogenize all this data, that you could still get it from any device on any deployment technology, and harmonize it and bring it back and provide it and give it to the right host, to the right analytics, and then once they decide what they want to do, they tell you back the message, and you deliver the message back to the right device on the right protocol. What if that was available today for sale? Do you think that would be a cool thing, Marcelo?
Yeah, I think it's, if there is any effort, I think would be on the basic data, the raw data that you're going to collect. But again, they have real-time emergency things.
Right.
So I guess
it would work on any use case, on any scenario, on any topology, on any network.
Yeah, because you don't need to design a specific network or technology.
Erik, what do you think? If that existed,
would
you think that would be cool? Will you buy it? Will you use it? Will you promote it?
If it existed, it would be cool. I still think it's a dream.
Okay, good. That's good. Victor?
Who am I speaking for?
Victor Carr.
Okay, thank you. Because I'm not buying I actually think we're closer. I think that's doable. I think it's going to take a good collaboration between all of the different facets to be able to do that, but I think that's actually doable. And I think it's closer than we think.
But if it was available, will you use it and buy it?
Nope.
Okay. Jonathan?
I would say, who doesn't want a universal translator? Yeah, of course.
Okay. Andrew?
Yep, come see me afterwards.
Tim?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously that's the goal, right? I mean, that's the biggest problem right now when people deploy a new technology is how do I get this into my legacy systems? So yeah, that translation layer would be
Eddie,
ideal.
stand up for the crowd. What do you think? You would buy something to solve all that problem? Yeah?
We'll pilot it.
Have somebody else buy it. All right, last question. Anybody? All right, last question.
I thought that's what historians did.
No, historian is a historian. We're talking about managing the data real time. All right, guys, thank you very much. Please give a hand for this panel, wonderful panel. We're going to take a selfie round. We're going to take a selfie now.